In this video, we're going to be looking into mental ray and indirect illumination. Indirect illumination, it's basically how lights in the real world behave. So, for instance, I just created a point light into my scene. Basically, the way the lights behave in the real world is that they shoot this pockets of energy or particles called photons, and they travel to space, and they hit surfaces, and that pocket of energy kind of keeps some of that color information with it, and then it just bounces to other surfaces, taking that color information to the surface. So in essence, we would see, in this example, we would see some of this red being projected onto this wall as a direct effect of a particle of light bouncing onto it and then bouncing onto that wall. And in order to be able to simulate that in Maya, you have to use mental ray. So mental ray, it's another renderer in Maya. By default, you have the Maya software. Mental ray will be this one right here, and again, you have to make sure this one has been selected in order for this to work. So I'm gonna do a couple of things before I start my workflow on how to create indirect illumination in this room. One thing to keep in mind is that basically these materials that I have on my scene are Maya materials, and again, I can go into my hypershade, and let's just wait till that pops up. I basically have a Maya material X, which are found in the mental ray materials, and it's basically this one right here, Maya material X. And the reason why I'm using that material is because these mental ray materials are designed to work with the indirect illumination that we're going to be creating and in the scene. So rather than being rather than using the materials that come by default with Maya, I'm going to use the mental ray materials that are meant to be used with mental ray. Another thing to keep in mind is that I do not have any sort of reflection in this element. It's literally, I guess it's going to be behaving the same way a blend would. Sorry, not a blend, a Lambert, which is the default materials that come that without reflection in Maya. So there's not going to be reflections, and again, at this point I don't want to be trying to compute that type of effects. I can do that afterwards. I just want to make sure that my direct illumination is working before I move on into that step. Also, before I start working on anything, I want to change a couple settings. I want to make sure that my color management checked on, and by default it's on sRGB, gamma corrected, and then linear. We want to make sure that the default output profile for our renders, it's going to be an sRGB gamma corrected, otherwise our images are going to look a little darker than they're supposed to. Also, under quality, I want to make sure that I'm in production quality, and again, it's because when I'm going to be doing renderings, I don't want to change my settings to fix jagged edges that my draft default is going to be producing. So I want to make sure that I'm working on in production quality for this. I also want to make sure that I'm working at a smaller size, but using the same aspect ratio of what my final product's gonna be. So if mine's gonna be something like an HD 1080 at the end, I want to make sure that I'm working at something that has a similar aspect ratio, but it's smaller, because I don't want to take too much time rendering things, and it could make my workflow really slow. So it's not a good approach. Let's see. Beyond that, again, we're going to be looking at the indirect lighting tab over here in a minute. But let's start again, we have a light in our scene, and this light, it's basically going to be emitting. It's going to be my main source light. So it basically going to kind of simulate what this light is going to be doing, which is kind of it's going to be emitting kind of lights in all directions. And again, I could use this. I could use an area light, but the reason why I don't like the area light for this instance is because and again, let me just kind of turn this. All the light that this area light is going to be producing, it's going to be under this plane looking down, but then anything that goes above it is going to be, it doesn't produce any light above this plane. So I could end up with some weird kind of dark areas on the top if I use it. So I'm just going to stick to the area light, to the point light, and see how it works for this. Let's go back to our rendering settings and into the indirect lighting tab. Maya has a couple of different ways to create an indirect illumination, and it's basically using these rendering global illumination effects that comes with that you can use with Mantle Ray. So let's start by looking at a global illumination. So basically, in order for Maya to know that you want to calculate the indirect lights and the bounce lights, you basically have to tell it by just kind of enabling that. So by enabling this, you're pretty much telling Maya that you want to calculate that indirect illumination. But then if I go ahead and render this, it's not going to look any different than any other render would give me. Again, I don't have any sort of indirect lighting happening or anything like that. Pretty straightforward default shading. And the reason for that, and it kind of comes back to what I was explaining at the beginning as far as how lights work in the real world, and it's photons. Again, there are these particles of light that are emitted and kind of bounce, carrying color information from surface to surface. So we need to emit those photons in order for Maya to calculate the indirect illumination. So this being our main source of light, I'm gonna have to go into the Mantle Ray, and I'm going to go into caustics and global illumination, and I want to tell this light to start emitting those photons. And again, let's just make a little bit of a comparison between the two, see if we get any difference. And I'm going to go ahead and render this. Alright, so, and again, that took only 7 seconds. This was our original, which is basically our standard shading. We don't see anything. And when we activate the photons, we actually start seeing some of the red color starting to bleed to our walls and to our furniture over here. Again, it's pretty subtle, but it's there. And again, our settings has just kind of, our render is just looking a lot brighter as well. So, and again, we're trying to simulate realistic lights in this scene. So one of the things that we need to add as well is also the decay of the light. And again, right now it's kind of looking like this because by default our lights are constant, meaning that it basically is as strong here as it is wherever it ends up. But lights don't really behave in that way in the real world. Lights start strong, and then as they travel through space, they actually lose their intensity. So we need to be able to simulate that in order for this to look, in order to simulate again realistic indirect lighting over here. So under my point light attributes, I want to make sure that I have have one of these decay rates selected. And again, it kind of just really depends on what you're comfortable with. Linear does a really nice job, but it's not realistic. It's not based on real world calculations. Quadratic is, though. So if you want a more realistic decay on your lights, you might want to go with something like quadratic. And again, one of the things that you're going to notice, and I'm going to go ahead, and again, this was our first one. This is what started happening afterwards, after the colors were bouncing. I'm going to keep this image, and I'm just going to go ahead and render one more. Alright, and by telling our light to kind of decay, we're starting to see, again, a little bit more of that bounce color. That, you know, those particles are kind of hitting the red surfaces and kind of hitting the wall, and that color is kind of carrying over. But we're also seeing a lot of really weird kind of shade effects. And again, we can address these by playing around with our global illumination settings. And let's see. Gonna fix this couple things. Alright, so photon intensity has to do with basically how strong the intensity of our photons as it's leaving its source. So this is pretty much saying, this right here is pretty much saying that the photon intensity as it leaves the source of light, it's at 8,000, and then it starts decaying at an exponent of 2. And again, we could probably make this either lower or higher, but you usually want to leave it at default 2, because that's kind of the way that real light kind of behaves. It kind of decays at a rate of 2. So in order for this to be brighter, we're going to have to increase the photon intensity. So that way it doesn't decay as fast and our room won't be as dark. The other thing that we need to increase is going to be our global illumination photons, which is the cause of this weird shading that we're seeing around our room. It basically does that because there is not enough photons to kind of interpret what's supposed to be happening there. So again, I'm going to save this image. I'm going to come here. Let's just double this up. 16,000, and let's double up the number of photons. So I went from 10,000 to 20,000, and let's just give that a try. And okay, we're starting to see that not only our scene's a little brighter, but some of these spots have kind of started to clean out a little bit. And again, the photon intensity has to do with how powerful these particles of light are as they leave, and then, you know, the rate that they actually decay as they go along. So if I want to make this brighter, I have to bring it up even more. Let's just try 30,000. And again, adding photon intensity to my global illumination is kind of making my scene brighter. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that I could very well kind of change the intensity of my lights as well. Let's just do something like a 5, and again, I'm going to make a copy of this. And it not might make much of a difference. And again, it's because this light is actually emitting our photons, and its intensity is always based not necessarily on how intense it is, but how strong these photons are kind of leaving our main our source of light, and how long it takes it to decay. So just gonna keep that in mind. And again, In order to fix this, I could very well keep adding to my photons. I could maybe kind of clean this up a little bit by just increasing the accuracy of my global illumination. Again, I'm back in my render settings. If I highlight my accuracy, it says control smoothness quality of global illumination. So right now it's at 500. If I increase that, it should make it smoother than what it is already. And again, I'm just going to go ahead and make a copy of this, make another render. And let's see if we see any difference between the two. Barely any. And again, it comes to a point where the global illumination by itself is not going to be doing much of it. We can keep changing our settings, adding more photon intensity, keep adding global illumination photons, and keep changing our accuracy. Probably increase our merge distance a little bit. Again, let's just see if that does anything. But at some point, global illumination by itself is not really going to do much. And again, adding a merge distance here didn't really. It kind of made things a little bit worse. So again, that's not really a good solution here. So to clean this up, the next step is basically going to be turning on this other global illumination effect, and this is called the final gathering. And what this is going to do is basically going to take a render and it's going to clean this up for us. So again, I'm going to go ahead and turn on my final gathering here. Okay, and I'm just going to go ahead and render this up. And again, I already have a copy of this image. I'm just going to go ahead and render. But another thing to keep in mind is, as we are making changes to our scene, it's not only making our final output a little better, but it's also increasing our rendering time. So that's one thing that you have to keep in mind when you're working with indirect illumination, that any changes that you make to your settings as you are trying to make things look better, it is going to increase your rendering time. And again, it just kind of depends on the situation. And again, I'm seeing a completely different result of what I had originally. This is what I was kind of having there before, and global illumination just pretty much took that and smoothed things out, and everything looks a lot nicer, somewhat more realistic. But it is dimmer, and we're gonna have to maybe come into our photon intensity and maybe doubling or tripling this up. But again, notice that we're having a lot of really nice indirect illumination, a lot of really nice red kind of bouncing onto our walls. That's not necessarily coming from our light. This is actually coming from all these red surfaces that we have in this scene. So let me come here, and again, let's just double it, see what it does. Render that. Again, just looks like our scene's going to be a lot brighter. At this point, the rendering time, I think, is kind of went from being a minimum of like 20 seconds to going up to maybe almost a minute. Well, it's actually only 34. But then again, I forgot to make a copy of this, but this looks brighter than the last one. And again, there's only so much that the photon intensity is going to be able to do by itself. And one thing to keep in mind is that the light that's producing your photons doesn't necessarily need to be the source of your light or the source of your shadows. Because again, I'm going to make a copy of this, and I'm going to go ahead and click on my ray trace shadows over here and start producing this render. And one thing, again, like I'm trying to say, is that even though we have this light and this one's still light producing the photons, and perhaps originally we thought it's going to be our main source of light. It doesn't need the light produced in our photon doesn't need to be our main source of light. And again, that's another approach to trying improving your scenes, that the light that's produced in the photon doesn't really need to be the main light that is actually lighting your scene. And again, we're starting to see that even trying to cast shadows with this light is not really doing much. It didn't really do anything actually. So I'm going to check off the ray trace shadows on this one. And I'm going to come here and I'm going to create another point light. And again, this one I want to kind of take care of the actual shadows of my scene and stuff. I'm going to come here to this light, the original one, and I'm going to make sure that the intensity is at 0 on this one. And again, it's because this light can be emitting the photons and all the global illumination and all that stuff. But this one I actually want to control the brightness of the room and my shadows. So again, by introducing this new light, we're going to see a couple of different things. I'm just going to turn this one to a quadratic fall off, because again, I want it to behave realistically as well. And again, notice that by making it into a quadratic decay, we're seeing a lot of black when I press on 7 to see a light preview. So I'm just going to go ahead and increase this a lot, maybe more than that, just to maybe 120 intensity. Alright, and also this light is going to be taking care of our shadows. And I want to, and since the other light is kind of emitting our photons, we don't need this one to be doing that. So this one's just going to be controlling the brightness of our room and basically our shadows. So again, I already have a copy of this, so I'm just going to go ahead and do a test. And again, this is going to take a little while, so I'm going to start pausing the video and then coming back as it finishes rendering. Alright, and this render took about 41 seconds, and again, we're starting to see that by adding another light, instead of using the original one, I'm actually able to control the brightness of my room, so I can actually make it brighter without having to increase my photon intensity in my original light. But I'm also able to create shadows the way I was enabled on my original render. So these are these mental ray shadows, and again, it's being these are being simulated realistically. I could probably make it a little bit brighter. I'll just go something like 150, see what that does. I also want to go into my ray trace shadows, and I want to add I want to increase the light radius so I can have softer shadows on my scene. So I'm just going to do, let's just do a 2 and see what it does. So again, I'm going to render this, or perhaps just an area of this. I can start doing area renders, so I don't have to get an idea of the whole scene. But let's just render a whole frame first and see what this does. So I'm going to go ahead and pause it, render, and then just pause the video. So render and pause. Alright, and I'm back, and okay, so again, we increased the light radius of 2 so we can soft our shadows a little bit. And again, the difference, you can tell that there's a little bit of difference in the noisiness, in the edges of it, so it's not as sharp as it originally was. But now we're having a couple of different issues with the shadows, and it's basically, it kind of looks noisy, and we can see that the shadows over here, they're a little bit, it's very noisy. It's changed from like being able to see what the vines look like to just being a bunch of noise. Again, one of the reasons for that, especially when you're using the ray trace shadows, is because we might not have enough rays in order to kind of simulate those shadows. And again, by default, the shadow rays are in 1, so we want to be able to increase this, and I'm just going to go ahead and do 10, and again just kind of see what it does. Another thing that I'm going to do is that rather than rendering this whole frame, again, I want to, maybe the two main shadows that I want to address are the shadows that are being casted by this vase over here and the table. Again, I'm seeing a little bit of noisiness here. So using my cursor, I'm just pretty much throwing a marquee around these two areas, and it's kind of created this red frame. So I'm going to be using the render region right here. So I basically draw in the area that I want to render, and instead of rendering the whole thing, I want to click on the render region so I only see this. So again, I'm going to click on render region, and again it's just going to be rendering this area. I'm going to go ahead and pause the video and come back when. And I'm back, and now that I've done this region render and I can compare between the two, and again this was my original mental ray shadow and I'm seeing just a lot of really nice shadows, but they're sharp, so I wanted to soften them up, and I added light radius and then I did that, and some of my shadow kind of lost not only definition, but it kind of grained out a little bit, and as you can see, there's some kind of weird effects kind of going over here, like a really weird edge. And by adding more shadow rays, it actually fixed a bunch of those issues, and I have now soft shadows. And again, this is really nice indirect lighting happening in my scene, because the red's kind of reflecting, or not reflecting, but bouncing onto other surfaces. And this is a nice base for me to kind of start working into adding more lights. For instance, the ones right here. I can start adding lights that are simulating what these lights are supposed to be doing, or I could have again maybe a lamp or something. But again, what I wanted to do is to have mainly that light on top pretty much be my main source of light for everything. So this is a really nice base for me to start kind of adding textures into my scene, and just doing a bunch of different tests to make sure it works. But you know, and now I can kind of go in there and start adding my really nice mental ray materials. You know, everything that's reflective or translucent, and you know, and you know, it's gonna simulate properly because I have a really nice kind of base to kind of to start with. But then again, you know, there is no right or wrong way of going about this. You can definitely kind of start texturing as you're lighting your stuff. Usually having a base like this for me usually works, because again, if I have a nice light setup to begin with, I don't have to be concerned with whether or not things are going to look right. I know that if I start applying texture to this, it's going to give me a nice, somewhat realistic renders. Alright, so this concludes again a working workflow with mental ray and indirect illumination, and I hope this was helpful.